What's going on YouTube? This is Rybo at the bench, and today I have another head-to-head video. This one should be pretty fun. So this is a head-to-head on two very similar knives, the CRKT Pilar and the ABKT American Buffalo Knife and Tool, I believe, Grunt. So the Grunt is a very interesting knife that I'd wanted to try out for a while. It's not very expensive, so I thought it'd be a great head-to-head on the Cricut Pilar, which I do like quite a bit. So both of these, obviously, you can tell are very similar in terms of overall design and size, but also in price. So I think this one comes in between $20 and $25, and then the Pilar, I want to say, is around 25 or 30. Don't hold me to that because prices can fluctuate. So let's do some kind of baseline measurements real quick. So the Pilar, obviously, because of its all metal construction, is going to be quite a bit heavier. So you see 4.2 ounces versus 2.7 ounces. So quite a bit heavier, 4.2, 2.7. And then let's do some size comparisons real quick. So sharpened blade length, which is always the big one to me. So you're looking at, let me turn this to, so right over 2 inches on the Pilar. And then on the Grunt here, you have about 2.5, a little under 2.5, which is really cool. For such a small knife, you're getting a decent size blade there. And then closed in the pocket, looking at 3.3 inches on the Grunt and 3.5 on the Pilar here. And then we'll just do the width, 1.29 inches versus at its thickest point, 1.43, very close. And then thickness on this guy, you're looking at right under 1/2 inch. And if I can find the thickest point here, so a little over 1/2 inch. Yeah, that's probably the thickest point that I can get to right there, at just over 1/2 inch. So overall, very, very similar knives in terms of size and kind of general design. So real quick review of the categories: pocket clip scales, overall size, considering height, weight, width, how does it carry, ergonomics, action, detent, how enjoyable is it to open and close, blade, steel, lock system, and the intangibles, which is just which one do I like the most. All right, so we will start with pocket clips. So let me flip these around and go ahead and close these for safety. Safety first. All right, so pocket clip on both of these guys. Not terrible for small knives. Small knife pocket clips are not my favorite. Dragonfly is probably the best example of this, but in general, just a pocket clip doesn't work super well on a small knife, in my opinion, just kind of awkward to carry it that way. But for what these are, I think these are perfectly fine. You can see they're very similar in terms of the design and the ramp. The Grunt over here on the right side is just a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit steeper, and you know, that's nice. In terms of kind of carry, you can see on the Grunt, you cannot move the pocket clip, so that is a big deal. Whereas on the Pilar, you can move it tip up or tip down. So tip up or tip down, you cannot move it left or right. And so basically both of these can be carried like this, or it can be carried like that. So, you know, this does have a slight advantage just because it does have some, you know, some options there, although I've already pointed out that the detail based on that option is pretty terrible, and that you have this recess here on either side depending on what you do. But I'm going to give the advantage to the Grunt here. And that's really just practicality. So, you know, my videos are often cut or carry. So two important things to me in a knife is can it cut and can it carry? And so carry is a big deal. And this knife, I think, carries fairly well for it being a small knife. Gets in and out of the pocket fairly easily. This clip is not too tight. And it comes down on these G10 scales, which means that it slides in and out pretty well. Same here, but this one is a little bit tight. I do have some issues getting this in and out of the pocket. It just tends to be the spring tension is kind of a little bit tight. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Grunt. All right, scales. So you have G10, I believe, here, and then you have these I don't know, aluminum or all metal scales here. Very slick, more of the kind of not custom look, but this milled look where it's just very angular, very, not much to it, but it looks sleek, right? This is CRKT does this a lot. There are other companies. Kershaw does this quite a bit, and so it's I think a nice aesthetic looking knife. And then you have a very non-flashy G10 right here. It has some texture to it, which is nice. You can see obviously the rounding here means that you're going to have this kind of cool pattern as the layers of G10 are sanded down there, which is cool. And you have not a super grippy at all. Very very similar to something like the plastic Ontario rat handles. This is not like a Kershaw Skyline or something like that. This is much slicker. You can't really feel a ton of material there. But I'm still going to give the advantage to the G10. For me, G10 just works a lot better than all metal. I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of all metal handles. While it doesn't give a ton of grip, you do feel some. It seems like just a better material overall for handles. I like the look of it a lot better, and I like just the practicality of it. So there you go. All right, overall size. So these are very, very similar knives. In terms of in the pocket, they feel practically identical. You do have a flipper tab here that you don't have over here. It doesn't really show up. This is a very, very unobtrusive, tab. You're not really gonna hit your hand on that a ton, or at least I have not. And so, in the pocket, these carry very, very similarly in terms of overall size. You're packing a greater punch in terms of the sharpened blade length here than you are with the Pilar, where that finger choil takes away from some of the blade length. But so this one really comes down to the weight. So I mean, both of these feel good in the pocket, but this one is fairly noticeable because of the weight. I mean, it's almost twice as heavy as the Grunt here. So this one really does disappear in the pocket a lot more than this does. And so, there you go. I mean, other than that, I can't really draw too many comparisons. The Grunt is a little bit thicker, but it's because of that rounded, kind of more ergonomic handle style, which is nice. So, both of them fairly efficient for what you're getting, but the Pilar is just a super, super heavy knife. So, so advantage to the Grunt there. Ergonomics. All right, so this is where the Pilar takes back its first point. So ergonomics, you can look at these knives and tell, while you are giving up sharpened blade length over here, you are getting a very nice finger choil that feels excellent in hand. Honestly, I've been pretty disappointed. Probably the biggest thing I've been disappointed with in the Grunt here are the ergonomics. It is a small knife, absolutely. It is not made to cut for extended periods of time, but naturally my hand wants to grab up here, which is not great because that is sharpened edge right there. So that would not turn out very well for me. So you have a very nice kind of handle right here, very nice curvature in there, and it does give your finger a nice place to rest, but it just overall it feels like I'm holding way too far back on the knife, especially for such a small knife like this. This is just not super practical for my normal needs. I tend to almost do something more like this if I'm slicing open packages, or even if I'm slicing open boxes. I tend to hold something like this, which is kind of this pinch grip on the blade here, which is fine. It feels okay, but it's not great. And so the ergonomics, you're definitely giving up some ergos for a longer blade, which is probably not a concession that I would have made on a knife this small. I would prefer to have something more ergonomic. I'd probably find it in my pocket a lot more. So advantage to the Pilar. Action detent. All right, so you have a flipper here, and you have just this frame lock here. So I've talked about this before. You can manage to get the kind of Spidey flick on this. This frame lock here does tend to stick a little bit. Even right there, it's sticking a bit, and I can kind of pull it and unstick it. So it doesn't maybe like 1 out of every 5 times that I open the knife, especially if you flick it open, you're kind of, you're forcing it open pretty hard. It is going to stick a little bit more with that. But besides that, you just kind of have this one finger or grab by the back of the blade here and open it up. It is a very strong, solid lockup. I have a lot of confidence in this lock right here. I don't think it's going to fail, obviously because it's a small knife, but also because you just have 3 huge chunks of metal right there, right? So you have a very generous lockup right there for such a small knife. I don't think that that's going to fail at all. On the Grunt here, you have what is a $20 to $25 flipper, and honestly, it's very practical. Now, I wouldn't say it's enjoyable, and I'll talk about this in my review of the Grunt. But if you open it, you probably can't hear that on camera, but it sounds very cheap. So I'm failing the deploy on purpose just to try and get this sound. So I don't know if you can hear that, but it just feels very cheap. However, the flipper works really, really well. I mean, it's not foolproof. Obviously, I can fail it if I want to, but the detent is strong enough to where it is fairly easy to open it on every try, and it flies open pretty well. You have a fairly thick blade here. That's probably another measurement that I should do between these in case anyone's wondering. Let me flip this just while I'm thinking about it. So 3.7 millimeter thick blade there, and I believe a slightly smaller, 2.7, so about a millimeter thinner, but still, a fairly thick blade that you have, and then obviously lighter handle width here, or handle material here. And so, the flipper is fairly satisfying for a $20-$25 knife. And so for the action detent, I think it's just easier to open this one-handed. This one has always felt a bit cramped in my hand. The kind of pill-shaped opening here has always felt a little bit awkward, a little bit knockoff Spyderco-ish. Have a lot of confidence in the deploy, but this one is more satisfying, I think, in more of a daily go-to. All right, the blade. So I've said before, but these blade styles are 2 of my favorites in knives. I really, really like these kind of sheep's foot cleaver style mini blades. I don't know why. They're probably not the absolute most practical, but I think they're fairly practical. There's kind of no nonsense. They can slice very, very well, and I'm a big fan of that. So this one's a little bit tough for me to make a decision on because I've cut a lot with both of these knives, and I've actually been incredibly impressed with the Grunt here in terms of how well it slices through bread, packages, that kind of thing. It really is just a cleaver. It just goes right through stuff like butter. Very nice grind here on the blade, for the money that you're getting, and I think overall aesthetically just a very nice blade shape, and so I really like that. But then again, I also really like the CRKT. The Pilar has a very nice blade. I think a little bit thicker, about a millimeter thicker, I think we just measured. Has this very nice swedge right here, and just kind of a no-nonsense cleaver style as well. And so I'll probably, they're very, very similar. I think aesthetically, both of them are very, very nice. This one has a little bit more of that kind of swoop to it that I just like. But I think practically the Pilar is probably the better blade, but this one is probably the toughest to call. I mean, these are dead even. You do get a bigger blade on this one, which I like, but I would give that up for something like this. I think all things considered, the thickness of this blade combined with that swedge, that nice kind of very deep hollow grind there, probably makes this one more enjoyable, but it's very tough. I mean, I've been very impressed with this knife. So let's continue on before I change my mind. Don't read too much into that decision because I think these are very, very similar in terms of blade designs. You can't really go wrong. Steel, I'm not even going to measure. They're both 8 CR13 MOV. No issues there. I mean, it's not great, but yeah, it's $20, $30. Lock system. So you have frame lock and you have your liner lock here. So while I've said, this one is very easy to open and close and very enjoyable to do that, minus the kind of cheap feeling. It is fairly, you have confidence in the open. It is just a very cheap liner lock, right? So you have two pretty flimsy pieces of metal, or at least one right there, that does have a lot of give to it, which means that it's very, very easy to disengage, incredibly easy, maybe a little bit too easy. But you have, not a ton of sharp lines in there, right? So it's gonna kind of roll off of that blade pretty easily, which is nice. Now I'm not sure how much confidence I have in how well that holds up. But overall, kind of a cheaper feeling. And then this, which, while it may not be as easy to open and, engage and disengage, the lock system is absolutely stronger. So advantage to the Pilar there. The lock system is, you have absolute confidence in that lock right there. And that's why I made the action detent and the lock system as two separate categories, because, sometimes it's split like this. It's a little bit more rare, but sometimes you do have something that may be more enjoyable to use, but I have less confidence in it than I have in this. So that leaves us with the intangibles. So basically it looks like I can either tie these knives, or I can throw the grunt as the winner. Let me think about this one for a second. I've gone back and forth on this, not really in preparation for the video, just, two very similar knives that I've been carrying and kind of thinking through what I like. The Pilar I really like. It's a very interesting knife. It's really cool in a lot of ways. I love the real thick blade here. I love the blade geometry, all of that. It's nice. The ergonomics are very nice, kind of for what this knife is. And honestly, when I first got the Grunt, I wasn't super impressed. It's a cool knife, absolutely. The blade geometry is very nice, but it felt very cheap to me. However, over some time carrying it, I've warmed up a decent bit, and I'm not sure that it'll stay in the collection. You have to wait and see my cutter carry review. But I think that overall, I'm going to go with the Grunt on the intangibles. And of course, every time I do intangibles, I then try to justify it with tangibles, so I'll try to do that real quick. But I think when you put it all together, you have G10, which I really appreciate on a $20, $25 knife. You have one of the coolest blade designs, geometries. Obviously, this one's really cool, but very nice blade style here. Practically, it just cuts very, very well. I mean, that's something that I didn't see out of the box, but as I've been using it, I've been very impressed with how well it cuts and just handles kind of everyday chores. And it's just very easy to get in and out of the pocket, open and close. I don't have to, this one, I kind of have to pull it against the pocket a little bit, kind of fight it out of the pocket. I kind of have to fight it to open it, kind of doing like one of these or whatever, and then I have to kind of fight it sometimes to close it. This one is just a very easy to use knife. Flip it open, close it up. It handles very well, although cheap, although it's not the best. For a $20 knife, you can't really go wrong. You can't ask for a ton more. So overall, I'm going to say intangible-wise, give it to the Grunt, which would put the Grunt as the winner of the head-to-head, and also the cheaper knife. So I'm very glad that I have the Pilar. I've really enjoyed carrying this. It's brought me a lot of joy and stuff. But I think that the Grunt, between the two, might be the better knife, although the ergonomics really detract from this. So take that for what you will. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.